Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bright and early today, or maybe just for me. Um, hey,
I
Bo,
don't
what's
know. It
happening?
feels the same. It feels the
Feels the
same
same
for
for
me.
you? Oh,
Yeah.
it seems like it's 7 a.m. for me. Um, what's going on? CrossFit
Not too much.
Games just wrapped
CrossFit
up.
Games. Yep. I was not there, but I heard really, really great things from the people that were there. And
Same.
just how great the workouts were and how much energy there was. And the race between the guys was really exciting. I've heard so many really cool things about it. So sounds like it was a success, which is awesome to hear. Did you watch
Yeah,
any of the events?
I did. I watched stuff on Sunday. I think the last two events is what I got a chance to
Cool.
watch. So it was good. And it looked like everybody that you had picked to be on the podium and pretty much ended up. You're almost right
Yeah.
there. Boucher in the house. What's up, buddy? How we doing? But well, to some degree, the games kind of has to do with what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to discuss threshold training.
Mm.
And there were
What
some
is
events.
threshold training?
Yeah, there were some events where it looked like there were some athletes that were borderline, maybe not walking the tightrope that we want for the proper threshold speed and threshold training. So if we're thinking about threshold training, what is it? What are we thinking about?
We're basically balancing technique and intensity, kind of doing the dance between the two, right? Where we don't want so much technique, where our athletes are so focused on doing it perfectly that they're not willing to make a mistake or deviate from that perfect form, and therefore the intensity is too low, versus the other end of the spectrum, which is what I know you were referring to with some of the games athletes, where the intensity is so much that the technique, starts to break down more than is acceptable for us, which of
Mm.
course in a competition like the CrossFit Games, that's inevitably we might see that a couple times. The back squat for the ladies comes into mind. Like I had a lot of people at the gym come up to me, which was actually really cool, that I had members, non-coaches at my gym come up to me and be like, "Did you see the girls do the back squats? I couldn't believe what their knees looked like as they were going to do that squat." And they were like, "I was yelling at the TV for them to push their knees out." I was like, "Yeah, Jess says, oh, the knees." So nice example of like they're pushing the intensity so much to lift that weight. The technique goes away much more than what we would allow in like the affiliate in an everyday class, I think.
And that's a cool example of you talking about the back squat, because a lot of times people think about intensity as it relates to CrossFit and they're like, "Oh, you guys you just try to move too fast. You just try to do too much." But you look at something like the max back squat, and the intensity there is in the form of more load, and they are looking for the maximal load that they can possibly lift. And so I think that's one of the tricky things, especially for coaches, newer coaches, is figuring out that balance, um, as far as their coaching is concerned. It's like, how much can I allow, and when should I allow them? Like, tell them to stop. When should I make the adjustments? Is there a point where they're trying for a new PR, and so I should let them get away with it? I know I've heard this question in that statement, but it's like, yeah, but if it's a PR, then, and it's like, where is that line? And let's start with heavy days. Like, what's our job as coaches, and how in the world do we help our athletes find the proper threshold line or threshold speed um, on a heavy day?
This is the $1 million question, I think, for so many coaches. It's a really hard thing to figure out because the problem is there's not like a black and white answer, right? We'll talk about that often when we introduce this concept at the level one. Like there's not a cheat sheet that we can give coaches that tell you exactly when to step in and when to say like you can't lift any more weight, because you're right, it is pretty athlete dependent, it's capacity dependent. But bottom line is we're looking at the major points of performance of the movement, we're looking at safety, And when something starts to be violated so much so that like our athletes, the way that I typically look at it is if our athlete can't correct it, like if they're not responding to my cue and they're not able to make a correction that's going to make their movement safer, or put them in a safer position, typically I consider that we've hit the line at that point. Because of course, for a heavy day, I just want to be clear, I'm not looking for everyone to move perfectly, because as the weight gets heavier, we are going to be riding the line of technique, and that's okay. Like we actually kind of want that, because if someone's moving picture perfect in a heavy day in a lift, they're probably not going as heavy as they can go. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, completely. Like if the bar speed's the same as it was in their first warm up set and the position is the exact same, they probably didn't actually get heavy for that day. So yeah, I'm with you, and I like, as you're describing that, and like you said, there's no perfect answer to give to that thing, but I start thinking about a couple scenarios. There's one scenario where it's like I know they've hit that threshold line, and that's it. Is like the athlete that is getting towards their max, they hit the rep. You're glad they lifted it, and you're like, that's it for today. That's all we got.
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
yes,
Like
hey,
you're
you can
watching
count.
with just such eagle eye focus, and you're like, is this their last? Is that your last one? Like, yeah, let's call it.
You like put that score on the board. We're good, but you are not doing any more than that. And then there's the other athlete that hits a rep that doesn't look as good as you want, and they want to go up, and they feel like they can. And I'm like, and I feel like they have the potential to. But I go, hey, I need to see that weight better. I need that weight with your knees out more this next one, and that'll earn you the right. And it's like, I think I think it was just one little hiccup in the lift. And if they concentrate, or maybe if they get in a better starting position or something like that, it's going to be better. And I might be all right with them going up. But they've got to prove it to me before we make the adjustment there, before we go up on that.
Yeah, and I really love that concept. I've leaned into that a lot more over the years, especially with things like heavy lifts, where it's like, yeah, you can. That's totally cool. I just need you to prove it to me. Like you have to earn the right to go a little bit heavier, and here's how you do it. And I think that's just such a great strategy for, especially for coaches that struggle a little bit with the confidence of really putting their foot down or taking control of their athlete and whether they're going to go heavy or not. It really helps create more of an objective line in the sand, where it's like, yeah, I get that you want to go a little heavier. Here's what I need to see you do. And then if you do that, you've earned the right to put a little more weight on your bar.
Yeah. Are there any lifts where there's more leeway or less leeway, would you say?
I say less. I give less leeway for a deadlift. Like when people, as soon as that pull starts happening off the ground and just their entire back looks like a Halloween cat, it's like, okay, no, like let's stop for a second. Or the whole, like they've gotten it a couple inches off the ground and then they do that. I don't even know what you would call it, like the pump, like their back is starting to round, the weight is pulling them forward and they're just like bending their knees and just trying to like pump it up.
Scoop it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I give much less leeway for that than something like leaning back in a press.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that with the deadlift. What about, let me ask you this. I'm sure I would assume you've seen this, is like you've got the athletes that are, maybe they're doing like a 3 rep or a 5 rep, and their first rep is the worst looking one, and then all the rest look better.
Yeah.
Like where's the line there, and what do you do in that situation?
Yeah. Typically, if the first rep looks not great, like it looks like something I want to jump in, that's hard because I do use a little bit of my judgment, right? Like I use a little bit of my instinct, because I can usually tell if I'm okay with letting them. Let me see what the second rep looks like. Like I'm not so quick to jump in and be like, drop the weight. I will watch the second rep. And like you said, so often that second rep, third rep, fourth rep just look better because we no longer have that dead pull off the ground. You're doing a little bit of that like touch and go. How I determine if they're going to keep going on their reps is how badly the first rep looks. Like if that first rep looks like a 1 rep max and like a bad 1 rep max, then I'll usually jump in. But if it's just like, oh, we're riding the line here and I don't love it, but it's okay. And then I'm going to see what the next few reps look like. Okay, cool. They look better. Then that's an in-between set conversation where I'm like, hey, your first pull, here's your first rep, whatever. Like, this is what I really want you to focus on. And then continue to like hold the shoulders back as you do the rest of your sets, or, you know, whatever the issue is.
And I like that point that you made right there, is having that conversation in between, because more than likely, if you've got an athlete that doesn't look great on the first rep, but the rest of the reps look better, they've got the strength and potentially have the positioning to do it right. They just probably did something wrong in the setup. So ideally, we're watching not only like with the position that their body's in, but trying to identify what's going wrong, right? I see it oftentimes where the bar is not close enough to somebody's body. So they pull and the bar is a little bit away from the shins. And so that pulls them a little bit forward. Their upper background or yields to the load a little bit, which causes the rest of it. But once they get the bar up to their waist and now it's pinned to their legs, it's going to move in a straight line. Sometimes you've got people where their hips are too low, and so they shoot their butt up, and then they're whatever happens there. So using that not only to identify that their movement doesn't look great, but trying to understand why that's the case. And if there's an obvious why, where there's a fault that's identified, there's a good chance that we can probably get that thing fixed, and ideally improve it so they can do the same weight again, or potentially go up if they move it well enough. So interesting stuff there. You make mention of the shoulder press. I don't like the lean back and the shoulder press.
I don't love it.
I was going to say that one puts as much pain on people's backs as like, I've probably seen more people like deadlift with a rounded back and been okay than I've seen people with a really, really, really big arch.
Like if we're really arching, but like a little bit of that. And here's the difference. This is what we're talking about, right? Yeah. Have we released the engagement of the core? Are we just literally like leaning back and I'm just trying to do like an incline bench press? Yeah. Or am I still engaged and we just have like a little extension as I'm trying to get overhead? It's like, and this is where the challenge is with threshold training, because there's so many different little things that come into play that's gonna contribute to whether or not it's like, all right, we got to jump in here, we've got to take some weight off, or whatever the case may be.
I always feel like there's this innate sense as a coach, as an individual, you're watching somebody do something and you have like the spidey sense, this feeling in your stomach where you look at it and you're like, either that looks and feels fine, or I'm okay with this, even if it doesn't look great, or there's the like cringe and the like, I'm uncertain about this. And I always try to tell coaches to lean into that. If you feel uncertain, and if that spidey sense in your stomach is telling you that your athlete probably either shouldn't be doing that weight or shouldn't be going up, trust that sense and communicate that to your athlete, and try to prevent them from going up or doing more.
Yeah, I like it.
All right.
And so that sense is only, it gets stronger over time, but it's only going to get stronger if you trust it when you feel it, right? Like if it's really subtle and you're even like newer coach, you're like, I'm not really sure. Just trust it, lean into it. And then that's going to contribute to give you confidence in the fact that like, if you have that feeling, it's probably right. And like worst case, worst case is you're making them go a little lighter than they maybe could. And that's not really a worst case scenario. You know, you're making them move better than they were.
Right.
And maybe not lifting as heavy as potentially they could. And I don't consider that worst case. I consider that part of the whole thing.
And that brings up another piece, and it's kind of in line with this, but it's more in line with just the coaching process of, what about those athletes or the coach that doesn't feel comfortable to tell an athlete not to lift more weight, or that they shouldn't go up, or that they need to go down? Oftentimes you either get pushback from the athlete, or maybe you don't have the confidence to tell an athlete that because you're afraid of that pushback. And I know that's not the concept of threshold training, but it is part of the process of being able to properly apply threshold training, because ultimately as coaches, it needs to be our job, and it is our job to direct our athletes and tell them what they can and cannot do. So I'd be curious to hear that from you and your thought process on how to have that conversation. And I'd also be curious to know if anybody watching or listening has gone through that process and what their thoughts are and how they approach it.
Yeah, maybe kind of best practices or tips, because my this is a question that has a lot of different like layers, right? And one of them is typically if you and we talked about this a little bit on one of my coach development calls for Affiliate U this week, because the topic this week is scaling. And so that's a huge, piece of scaling is you go to scale somebody, and if there's pushback, what happens? And one of the coaches mentioned that rarely does he get pushback from members at his gym that he coaches, simply because that's kind of the culture, and they know that that's what they're there for. And they know that, like, hey, they have rapport with the coach, they trust the coach. And the whole name of the game is, if coach tells me that I need to lower my weight, well, I must need to lower my weight. Like, because I'm not in there just picking people out of a hat being like, I don't want Todd to get a good workout today, I actually want Ben to beat him, so I'm gonna have Todd. It's like, that's not what this is all about. And he has more trouble when he has drop-ins come in, whether that's because they're not used to getting coached or he doesn't have that rapport with them. So a huge part of it is more than just that one interaction, that one like singular interaction. It's just kind of how you lay the foundation for everything. But one of the things that I do is the thing that we talked about a few minutes ago, is just giving them that like objective. I need you to do this on the next rep. And if you do that, then you've earned the right to go a little bit heavier. Or great strategy are the prove it rounds, or the if we're talking about Metcons, it's like, you guys need to be able to do at least 10 of these unbroken in the first round. And if you can't, that means it's too heavy. Now here's the challenge there. You have an athlete that can do 10. You watch them and they're doing 10, but it's just, you can see that it is too heavy for them. So what do you do then when they're like, I did the 10 like you told me, but your spidey senses and you still know, you're like, that's too heavy?
Well, let's before we dive into that specifically, let's transition from heavy days into Metcons, right? Because
Okay.
there's a difference to some degree of finding that threshold speed or that threshold line when it comes to Metcons, because typically the weight that's on the bar or the movement that they're doing, it's not like a 1 rep max, right? And so that same concept of watching somebody do a heavy lift doesn't look the exact same. It now, to your point right there, like, you've got to work out where first, in order to know how to find the threshold speed for our athletes, we've got to know what the stimulus is,
Mm-hmm.
meaning how long should the workout take? What should each movement within each round look like? What should the sets and reps be like? And so, to your point right there, if you've got a workout where you need to be able to do 10 reps of, let's call it a clean, unbroken, to meet the stimulus, what do we do and how do we determine what is the right weight? And I think I left this up here from Steven of, like, if you're cringing as a coach, you need to say something. I think that's a pretty straightforward, like, good rule to live by right there. If something's making you cringe or making you uncomfortable, you better say something about it. But let's talk through that concept of, we've got a Metcon now. We know what the stimulus is. How are we using threshold training to help our athletes meet that stimulus and do what we need to?
Warm up, specific warm up. We're looking at people during warm up, cataloging, taking note, making corrections. Are people responding to my corrections at a light weight? Like, that's huge, right? Because that's what threshold training is, right? We're balancing the technique with intensity. And so if somebody can't respond or make better positions with their technique with low intensity, where I'm calling reps, there's no speed yet. The volume hasn't been there because we haven't started all the workout. The load is light, and they're not able to make those corrections. Then that obviously tells me that we're going to be limited with our weight. And then as we start to load up with the working weight, if you will, so let's say we're talking about this hypothetical workout that has cleans in it, and they need to be able to do 10 of these cleans unbroken. Yeah, I mean, so much of that has to do with what's happening as we start loading up and giving them just numbers that it's like, I'm watching them do these reps. And I, again, just from years of seeing this, I can look at someone and see them do 2 reps of a clean and be like, that's too heavy for them to do 10 reps. And then giving them those just little numbers to think about,
Yeah, and like Boucher says here is like the whiteboard brief's going to be our ally here. This is where we can talk about the workout, talk about the stimulus, what we want to see from our athletes. And then like Steven says is we set targets on how many reps you want done at a time. And so here I think is the tough thing for newer coaches is we set the target of, hey, you've got to be able to do 10 cleans unbroken in the first round, no problem. As a workout goes on and fatigue sets in, and there's a compounding effect of the rep that we've done earlier, the other movements that are included in this thing, it makes it a much more challenging to continue to be able to do those sets of 10. And so the challenge becomes like, all right, I told you guys I want you to be able to do a set of 10. Maybe I had you do a set of 10 in our little teaser or warm-up round, and you accomplished it. But how do I know whether, like, did it look so easy that even out of breath in the 3rd round of a 5-round workout, will you be able to do the exact same thing? Or were you able to get 10, but the last 3 reps while you're fresh were a little dicey and, a little dicey as you're doing it? Like, if that's the case, then although they met your requirement of 10 in a row, we still need to be like, hey, it looks like, Kristin, it looks like you could do 10, but here's what I want in today's workout. I want you to be a little bit faster and move a little bit better. So here's what we're going to do. We need to take this down a little bit. So once again, that's kind of the art of the entire process there, which is an easier thing to describe than it is to actually account for and do on the gym floor.
Yeah. And with that said, really
things.
quickly, saying, oh, it looks a little dicey. Describe to us what that means to you. Like if something looks a little dicey, can you give us a little more like concrete things you're looking for?
Just if the reps like slow down, like even that, not
Mm-hmm.
even technique breaks down of like, hey, if it's 10 reps touch and go, those should be like down and up, consistent space or consistent pace. And rep 1 and rep 10 should essentially be the same speed. Dicey is for the people that can do the 10 but shouldn't do that weight in the workout
Mm-hmm.
is the first 3 moved really fast, the second 3 moved a little bit slower but okay, and then there was 2 that was pretty slow, and then it looked like a pause and a breath for the last 2 to be 2 power singles even though they didn't put it down. That's what I mean by dicey even in that scenario right there.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a challenging thing. You mentioned earlier, and this is one of the tough things that sometimes I don't get where this gets in the athlete's head, but you made mention of athletes thinking that they're not going to get a good workout if they take the weight down. It's like,
Yeah.
why in the world would a lighter weight make it not as quote unquote good of a workout? You tell me as an athlete, is it harder to go heavy and slow or light and fast?
I personally think it's harder to go light and fast. Because if you go heavy and slow, you're going slow. You can take a minute, you can rest, you can like your heart rate is probably not as jacked. Yeah, James says, I'll throw that up there. Scares me when I see it lighter. Yeah, I would so much rather it be a little bit heavier because everything, not only are you expected to rest a little bit more, but the actual, even like, and the sets are going to be smaller. So the second that you're like, this kind of hurts, I can put it down and rest. But even the rep itself is a little bit slower. So
Right.
yeah, that's for me. And yeah, most of the time, if we lower somebody's weight and just ask them to go a little faster and do it really, really well, like concentrate on their, moving really well, but also going faster, that gets them a good workout.
Yeah, I've never seen a quote unquote bad workout. I've seen people approach a workout in a bad way and not get as good of a workout. But anyways, so all right. So we've got an athlete. Let's try to paint the picture on how do we determine What's going to be the proper threshold? And let's go back. We use this workout a lot. Let's go to the workout Fran.
Okay.
So, what number one, we need to know what the stimulus is. So tell me what the stimulus is. What's the time? What's the sets? What's the
4 to
reps?
7 minutes, 4 to 8 minutes, under
Okay.
10. Ideally, I'm looking for my people to be somewhere in that 4 to 8 minute range, 4 to 7 minute range.
All right. And what are those sets? What are they supposed to look like?
Pretty much unbroken, fast.
Okay. So is that
Everybody
it?
doesn't have to be unbroken. I mean, it's like, what are we talking about? Who's setting the pace for the 4 minute? Or are we talking about just in general when we're coaching our whole big group of people?
Yeah, in general, right? Because
Yeah.
we want to drill down to figure out how to determine how to find the threshold speed for somebody. So like, yeah, they need to be fast and unbroken, but that's not realistic, right? So
Right.
what is
3
realistic? What are
sets.
the 3 sets on both
Yeah.
movements?
3 sets on both movements throughout it. So we're going maybe sets of 7, sets of 5, and then at the end when they're tired, like cool, sets of 3.
Okay.
And then just chip away at it, keep moving, minimal rest, more moving than rest. Yeah.
Is that for both the thruster and the pull-up, or is there more wiggle room with one versus the other?
I personally think there's more wiggle room with the pull-up. Like if we're on the round of 9 and someone's where they need to be and they're getting 1 or 2, jump down, jump right back up, 1 or 2, and they're just literally chipping away productively, I'm also okay with that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like gymnastics movements, the cycle time's a lot quicker as far as like doing the movement itself and the break you can get back on the bar. So I look at it same with you as like 3 sets on the thrusters. I can live with probably 4, maybe even 5 sets on the pull-ups depending, right? And so now we've got an athlete that wants to do it RX. So she wants to do it at 65 pounds. How are you going to go through the process? You mentioned the warm-up. We've mentioned like a teaser or tester round. Tell me, what does that look like in class? So that way, by the time, ideally, and that's the thing is like, ideally, by the time the workout starts, we've already done our job and we've already set our athletes up and we don't have to make any adjustments once the workout happens. It's like they're already set up for success. So walk me through that process. We've taught the thruster, we've taught the pull-up. Now we're starting to load. There's a warm-up round. Like, what are you looking for and how are you approaching this thing?
I'm looking for people to be doing their thruster and it look still pretty light for them. Like they shouldn't be struggling like to end the top press out. The thruster we should be able to do multiple reps. Typically for something like Fran, I'll tell them I'll just tell them that I want that first round done in no more than 3 sets. So I'll throw the number 7 out there to them. I know that some coaches will go higher than that. Like, I want you to try to get the first set unbroken, or I want you to be able to do 15 unbroken. But I'll typically say I need you to be able to do at least 7 unbroken because that's what the goal is. So I'll give them that number. And then more than likely we'll definitely do a little test round for one reason, because it's a short, fast workout and I want the heart rate to be up a little bit before we say 3, 2, 1, go. But I want them to feel, going from the thruster to the pull up and then back to the thruster. So more than likely I'll have them do 5 to 7 for the test round. And then just, again, like go with my gut and what it looks like. Are those 5 to 7 looking like, okay, they could easily pick the bar back up and do another 7 like right now? Or do they need a minute? And if they need a minute, and it's like, that's a little too heavy for a workout like this. Or if the technique looks bad, right? Which typically, and that's the hard part. And that's one of my questions for you. With threshold training between the specific warm up, the load up phase, all of that versus actually happening in the workout. Because the hard part is that if we're doing that test round and we're giving them that first set to look at, often we don't see the technique breakdown at that point because they haven't been hit with the volume and the fatigue quite yet. And so we're not necessarily, when you're making that judgment call prior to the workout, I'm not necessarily looking at the technique right? I'm not looking at like, oh, well, their technique looks good. I'm looking at like, how heavy does that look for them? How slow are they going through the reps? And I know that if that's the case now, even though their technique might look fine, as the workout progresses, that's probably where we're going to see the technique start to break down as the fatigue and everything fits in or hits in.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think that's it exactly. Now, I will say that usually if they're moving slow, like in the warm-up rounds and the weight looks heavy, typically there's some variations of the technique that's not ideal either. Right? Just in general, if it's looking slow and heavy, they're probably not moving as well as they are with the empty barbell. So, considering all that stuff and trying to factor in the fatigue is going to be huge. And this is one of those where there's certain scenarios and there's certain workouts and there's certain loads and movements where it's like there's a little bit more wiggle room, like to the point of Boucher here of if I've got an athlete at the end of Fran that I let do it RX and they're doing doubles or singles on the pull-ups and there's that look of like what just happened to me in their eyes, that's kind of like a rite of passage. It's like I'm all right with this. If it takes you if you're all the way going till the 8-minute mark, and maybe even your last round of thrusters, you did like you picked it up and it felt heavier than you thought, and you did 2 reps and then dropped it and looked at the weight like, did somebody add more weight to this? Like, what is going on with that? I think we're all right. As we discuss and as we talk about it, at like I think at the level 2 or just in general, it's like the heavier the weight gets, the lower the margin for error there is. And so it's like I can live with a little bit more degradation in technique at lighter loads than I can at heavier loads. So I think that's one thing to always consider there as well.
Yeah, I always think of that with Helen too, the workout Helen, just that last round of pull-ups and everyone's just like chipping away one at a time just to try to get it done. And it's just, I love it. It's like, let's go. This is good.
There is something to be said for that. Let me see. What do we got here from Jens? How would you consider the following workout in terms of threshold? 4 rounds for time, 10 sumo deadlift high pulls. What is that? That's one. What is that weight?
I don't
95.
know.
95,
Okay.
75, right?
Yeah.
What's the 20 of? What do we got there, Jens? 20 what? 30 air squats. I mean, how would you communicate to enforce the threshold? Do you have an idea of what do we got for that second movement? Burpee, is that burpees over the bar?
Oh, burpees over the bar. Okay. Burpees over the B. BOTB. Burpees over
All
bar.
right. I
Cool.
got you.
Okay. So 10 sumo deadlift high pull in 95-65
Yep.
is the 40-30.
Yep.
10 sumo deadlift high pull, 20 burpees over the bar, 30 air squats. Okay. That's a light sumo deadlift high pull. They should be on.
I mean,
you don't think so?
yeah.
I think that's light sumo deadlift.
Well, I mean, a heavy sumo deadlift high pull is 135, right? 95.
Yeah.
So it's just one jump up. So I think light is 75, heavy is 135, 95 is moderate.
95 medium.
Yeah. But with 10 reps, to your point, I think it should be unbroken. I can live with 2 sets later on.
Yeah. For round 3, 4, we're gonna go 6 and 4 instead of all 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the where the rubber meets the road in this workout is the 20 burpees over the bar.
Okay.
So let's look at that. I'm gonna go. We're 30 seconds worth of sumo deadlift high pulls, but I'll round up to a minute. 20 burpees over the bar. Some people maybe the first round could do it in a minute, but I'm gonna count for
take a while.
2 minutes there.
Oh, that's long.
10 burpees a minute. This is me finding the outer edge, and then 30
generous.
air squats.
Yeah. 30 air squats. That's 30, 60 seconds.
So I want this thing to be done in somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
So with that, as far as threshold is concerned, I want positions with the sumo deadlift high pull for where the first 2 rounds are done unbroken. And obviously the positioning looks good. So that's what I'm looking for there. That's why I'm going to be coaching my athletes too. I can live with two sets in the later rounds. The burpees, I've got to have somebody that can steady move on the burpees. And like I said, they should be done in 2 minutes the first 2 rounds. No later than that. And then the air squat should be consistent. I can live with like a break or 2 breaks in this thing. But it's like air squats, as far as threshold training is concerned, as far as movement quality, I'm going to be coaching them to movement quality. There's not something somebody can do movement quality wise that's going to make me change that for them or scale that for them. Now,
Change the air squat? Would you
like
change the
change the
volume for
volume
anybody?
of reps or tell them they needed something like that. But there's a capacity thing there, right? And
Mhm.
so this all goes back to the stimulus of the workout, and also how new is the athlete? How impactful is 30 times 4, 120 reps? How sore is that going to make them? So there's probably some athletes potentially that I would have that are newer athletes, more beginner athletes, more deconditioned athletes, that I would probably limit the volume of air squats there potentially, just to keep it within a minute window, and also to keep them from being too beat up and too sore from that thing. The burpees themselves is probably the biggest thing that I would look to scale, and that's going to be either scaling jumping over the bar. Some people I'd let step over the bar. Some people I'd have do regular burpees,
Regular.
and there's probably a good or a decent amount of people that I mess with the total volume. And so this is kind of that fine line of threshold training. We think of threshold as like movement quality and pushing intensity, and technique. And I don't see a lot of that in this workout.
What things would you be looking for the sumo deadlift high pull? Like, what would be kind of on your mind that you're like, okay, I need to watch for that as far as the degradation of like technique or things that you're going to want to push and correct during the workout?
2 things I need to see maintained throughout, and that's going to be back staying flat and knees staying out. Everything else I can live with. If I've got an athlete that has a weight on the bar that they can keep their back flat, and their chest up as they're doing their reps, especially because it's going to be pretty quick. The reps will be pretty quick at this weight. And there's a tendency as people get tired to keep their legs a little bit straighter and just bow at the waist. And that can lead to people
Mhm.
rounding their back. And so that's where the knees driving out becomes a big thing, is because as they bow forward, if they drive their knees out, that's naturally going to sink their hips. And as their hips sink, that's going to give them the ability to potentially keep their chest up and their back flat. So
What
those are the
about
2
as
main things I'm looking at there.
people get tired and instead of pulling the bar all the way up to them, they start to like bend down to it?
Well, I don't see that one too terribly often, but I have seen that before. I do see where as they get tired, they don't pull it up very high, or their elbows are kind of down, not necessarily like this, but the
Mhm.
elbows aren't above the bar.
Like,
But either one of those things aren't necessarily things that I guess if you're bending down towards the bar, that's a pretty good indication that the weight is too heavy and you're not getting enough momentum with your legs to get it up. So you're trying
mhm.
to meet the standard by
You're
moving down to it.
right, you're meeting the bar instead of pulling it up to that. I typically see that for that exact reason. When someone goes a little heavy and then as they get fatigued throughout the workout, they just they're no longer able to complete the range of motion by pulling the bar up, and they just kind of hinge over, like, meet the bar. That'll be one that I'll try to correct if I see that happening mid workout, as far as, because here's the I guess one of the threshold training questions, right? We've talked a lot about, okay, what is the stimulus? How are we going to set people up for success during the general warm up? What are we looking for prior to the workout starting? What's the difference for you once the workout actually starts as far as threshold training goes?
Could you ask that again? Say that.
What's the what's the difference for you as far as once the workout actually starts? Like, we've figured out the stimulus, we've communicated clearly during the whiteboard brief, we've given people their like qualifiers, we've done the test run, all the things we've talked about. But once the workout starts, and then you have to do threshold training during the workout while you're watching people, like, what are some differences that pop into mind for you mid workout versus how we've set everybody up?
Well, like I said earlier, hopefully I feel like if I've done my job, I've already accounted for most everything that can show up. I identified the flaws and faults in their movement in the specific warm-up. Ideally, I've given some cues and corrections that have proved to work. So I already have banked those. I know, like, hey, Kristin's knees are going to cave in. When I told her this, she was able to fix that. I noticed that she tends to set up with her feet too wide in the deadlift setup. So I'm going to remind her to keep them underneath her hips. Like, all of those type of things are in my brain. We've done the test round and I've watched her do a set or two with the load that she has on the bar. And I've already, evaluated whether this is going to be appropriate for the stimulus and for the workout and the sets that we're looking for. Now, when it comes to workout time, who I'm really going to pay close attention to are probably those few athletes that I've negotiated with prior to the workout. And what I mean by that is there's an athlete that I'm like, hey, and let's use Yen's workout right here. There's an athlete that I'm like, hey, Kristin, I know the weight's supposed to be 65. I think we should just stick with 55 today. And you go, but I really want to do 65. I think I can do it RX today. And, I've watched her test her round and I've agreed to allow you to attempt it as prescribed today. And so we make an agreement. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to let you do it at the RX weight, but here's what I need. I need the first 2 rounds to be done unbroken. And I also need you to really focus on what we are working on in the warm-up, which is driving those knees out and keeping your chest up, especially as you return the bar back to the ground. You do those things, we're good to go. If not, we're going to make some adjustments. So now we've made a agreement.
A blood pact.
A blood pact, yep. We spit on our hands and shook hands, whatever that thing is, right? We've made that happen. And now we've got this agreement. And so now I've got that in my head that, like, hey, Kristin is somebody that is borderline using a weight that's maybe appropriate or maybe not. And so I am going to default to looking towards you and making sure that you're holding up your end of the bargain. And if so, then I'm going to hold up at my end of the bargain, which is to let you keep doing that. If by chance you don't hold up your end of the bargain, I'm going to remind you, hey, Kristin, chest up and push those knees out hard. All right. If you can't do that, or you broke the first round or second round, then we're going to take the weight down to a weight that I know you can maintain that. So those are the type of things that I'm considering there.
What if I'm holding up my end of the bargain, but my workout's just getting a little slow because this is a little heavier than I should really be going, and I'm getting a little tired, and now I'm potentially going to miss the stimulus from the time, but I'm moving okay. I'm just giving you some scenarios that happen.
Yeah. So in that one, and this one's tough too, because a lot of times coaches have so much going on. It's really hard to know where your athletes are at in their workout. Like, what round are they on? How is it looking? That kind of stuff. And so it's taken me some time over the years to make sure that I'm trying to pay attention. And although I'm not like counting everybody's reps and rounds, I'm checking in on that stuff, either paying attention to every time they get back to the bar and trying to keep like a light mental note, or even walking up to them and being like, all right, Kristin, movement looks pretty good. How are you feeling? What round are you on? And when everybody else is finishing up round 3 of the 4-round workout and you're like, just starting round 2, I'm like, all right, cool. Either I make an adjustment, we're only going to do X number of rounds, or hey, here's what I want. Instead of the 20 burpees, the last 2 rounds, we're only going to do 10. And I'm going to, lighten this weight when you finish this set of the sumo deadlift high pulls. Because that's a scenario where most people, from my experience, and this is funny because when I started, I was like, hey, I remember telling my coaches this when I opened my gym. I was like, hey, if we scale inappropriately and we let somebody do, this workout as prescribed, they've already mentally committed to that. So don't adjust it in the workout. Just wear it, even though they're going to be way longer, and wear it, and we'll adjust next time. And I was like, what a dumb idea that was, because everybody in the middle of a workout, when I go up to them and you're fighting your guts out, trying to get through the workout, and you're way behind and you're going to be dead last by a whole round. When I go up and go, hey, Kristin, I think we'll just do 3 rounds. They all go, okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Or I'm thinking we should only do 10 burpees. Yes, thank you. That's great.
I love that idea. Thank you. You were right, coach. I should have gone lighter. Yeah.
So it's like checking in and having a pulse on what's going on in class is going to be a big piece of this, and not being afraid to make the adjustments necessary mid-workout. Change the weight, lighten the weight, lessen the number of reps, do less rounds, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I love you so much good stuff you said there, because number one, if we're talking about implementing threshold training correctly, so much of that is front loaded. So much of that is like a proactive with us, right? With us being coaches. It's everything we talked about, getting our athletes set up for success before the workout even starts. So then our job during the workout is just to continue to remind them the things that we've already told them in the workout or in the warm up, so that they can do the workout exactly as we set them up for success to do it. It doesn't work like that 100% of the time. So to have the plan on, all right, what's my strategy going to be on how I'm going to execute this threshold training and keep people at that nice balance with their technique and their intensity. And I love that you're not prioritizing, but you're keeping in mind, top of mind, the people you negotiated with, the people that in that warm up, you're like, all right, like that's cool. I'm okay with you doing that. But in my head, I know like I'm going to need to continue to check in on them. And I think that's a great strategy, so that we're not running around like crazy trying to not have any sort of plan as our athletes are going. And then we miss the things that we actually should be stepping in on. Cause there are scenarios where we do have to step in. If we set ourselves up for success, it's going to happen less often. But to have a strategy for how we're going to step in when we need to, that I think there's some really good stuff there. Yeah, I love this from Amanda. You were right, coach. It's my favorite phrase. I love that phrase.
And I think to your point, like the stepping in, and sometimes people get nervous about that. And it's almost like they feel like we have to like take the barbell out of their hands and like punish them in front of everybody and scold them. It's like typically when I'm stepping in because somebody's not holding up their end of the bargain, or I just got it wrong and allowed somebody to do something they shouldn't do, it's as simple as they move on from the cleans that they're about to do to the run or the pull-ups, and I just change the weight off their bar. Mm-hmm. Like I don't necessarily need to make a big deal out of it. I'm going to change the weight. I'm going to put the new weight on. They're going to come back to the bar, and when they get it, that's what they've got in front of them. And we can have a discussion after class or whatever, but it's not like it needs to be this big thing. Like typically I don't have to do it in the middle of their set. There are some times where, and I'm sure you've seen this before, where athletes middle of a set, you look over and they're like stripping weight off their bar. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. All right. I'll help you. Let me get the other side for you. This is great. But yeah, if somebody's not holding up their end of the bargain, they're not moving correctly, make the adjustment mid-workout. If it's weight, change the weights when they move on to the next movement. If it's the volume of reps, check in with them and communicate to them. Hey, let's go down to this because I need you to finish here, or whatever that is. And like Amanda said, very often are people thankful for that as opposed to pushing back on us.
Yeah, that's a strategy I use pretty frequently when that scenario pops up. Hey, exactly like you said, what round are you on? What round are you starting? Whatever. And if they're too far behind, then the quick solution especially for a workout like we were just talking about that has like high volume burpees, high volume air squats, it's just to shave a little bit off the volume so they can get through it a little bit quicker. What I encourage you guys that are listening to do is practice that when the scenario calls for it, instead of just seeing like, oh, well, it's a 12-minute time cap, so I'll just let them go until the time cap. That doesn't really do much for what we're talking about.
We've had a discussion about this a lot in our last 3 lessons, actually, with Coach Dev. We had 2 weeks ago, we talked about the stimulus of the workout. Last week, we were talking about creating a lesson plan. This week, talking about scaling. And I think that's such a big thing is, hey, time caps, are they good? Are they bad? My opinion is indifferent. I think they serve a purpose, but we shouldn't allow athletes to get themselves off the hook by hitting the time cap. And we shouldn't allow ourselves as coaches to get off the hook by just by not having to find the proper loading or proper reps for people and just knowing that, well, the workout's over in 18 minutes anyway, so no big deal. It's like, ideally, even if you use time caps quite often, ideally nobody hits a time cap.
Yeah, because if you think about it, if the workout is 4 rounds for time, I want all of my athletes to get in 4 rounds. And oftentimes, if we lean on the time cap too much as a crutch, it's like, okay, well, now some athletes got in 2.5 rounds, some athletes got in 3 rounds, some athletes got in all 4 rounds. And obviously, the time priority workouts, the AMRAPs, that's where we're going to see variation in how much work people get done. But when we have those task priority workouts and the stimulus of the workout is that we want our athletes to get 4 rounds of something in, then I want to do my best so that every single person gets 4 rounds in. And it all comes from everything we've been talking about, like scaling them properly, setting them up for success, doing the threshold training mid-workout if needed. It's just something to think about. And if, like you said, I agree with you, Todd, there's so many programs and coaches and gyms now that's like every workout has that time cap. And I think it's really, really helpful for lesson planning purposes and to just help kind of, get all our ducks in a row for how long the workout's supposed to take and everything. Just beware of the pitfall of using it as a crutch to replace scaling our athletes properly and finding that threshold for them mid-workout. I'm done with
Got
my
it.
time cap.
All right.
Or my, yeah.
Nice. I love this from Grant, working on the homework from this week around scaling options. Like taking the time to put in the work and think through some different alternative options is always huge. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left. I'd love to hear any questions that anybody has around threshold training, but I've got one final one for you. And this is in line with when CrossFit HQ rolled back out the level 4, there were a lot of coaches that struggled with the concept of properly applying threshold training. And I think there were scenarios where what we've described the entire call is where somebody misses the ability to correct that and let somebody go too far with not proper mechanics or choose a weight that's inappropriate. I think there's a time and a place, or there's also a time where people can go the opposite route. And typically I see this like with complex movements where they look at something like an overhead squat and they're like, oh, well, you quote unquote can't overhead squat, so we're just going to immediately move to a front squat or a back squat. What are your thoughts on that? When is like, where's the threshold? Not on somebody that can't because they have an injury and literally can't move their arm over their head, but the overhead squat's really challenging for them. And so they can't lift as much weight as they could with a back squat or a front squat. Like, what does threshold training look like on a day like that? How do you navigate something like that? And this kind of goes back to the concept we talked about of, I want to get a good workout. So what do I do there? How do we do that?
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a hard question, right? Because again, there's no absolutes in anything. So there certainly could be advantages to having them back squat or front squat if we want them to get the stimulus of like actually moving some load, like moving a little heavier weight. But I am almost always in the camp that they're still going to overhead squat. We're just going to go lighter, and it's going to be only a barbell, or it's going to be PVC pipe. Like if someone really struggles with the overhead squat, doing it with a PVC pipe is hard.
Right.
It's hard. It is devastating. And there is so much value in pushing through that and getting in those positions that are hard for you. Again, we're not talking about people that are injured that should not be doing the movement. That's a different conversation. These are just the people that are like, I'm really bad at overhead squatting because my mobility sucks. Well, the only way you're going to get better at overhead squatting is to overhead squat. So that's
So here we
where I
go.
go with it.
Right. And so Grant asked the question, would you rather someone overhead squat with the trainer bar or PVC pipe or front squat with a relatively heavier weight? So let's say we've got a heavy day. Let's say it's 5 sets of 3 reps, overhead squat. You've got the athlete that like, as soon as 65 pounds goes on the bar, as soon as anything other than an empty barbell, things go awry. Elbows start to bend. They're squatting on their toes. What are we going to do with this athlete?
Well, I'm still going to have them overhead squat, like especially during the whole warm up portion, and do all the reps and with the trainer bar or the PVC pipe and coach them to good movement. And if it's a heavy day and they want to get, they want to get, they want to move some weight, they want to get a good workout in. I, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with like, okay, you're going to front squat for your set, and then after your front squat, you're going to grab the PVC pipe and do like 8 high quality, as good as you can do overhead squats with the PVC pipe, and that's your set. Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It's like, hey, you're going to go through the specific warm up. You're going to use your PVC pipe or your trainer bar. We're going to really dial in the points of performance and work on your squat. And in fact, the first few like build up loads, you're going to keep overhead squatting, but there'll be a point in the session to where I'm like, all right, you want to feel a little bit of weight. Let's switch to a front squat or a back squat or whatever it is. But you're going to do your front squats. And then to your point, we're going to do our overhead squats afterwards, probably a couple more reps. Maybe it'll be 5 reps. Maybe there'll be some tempo or some pauses in that to really work on those positions. Yeah, I think it's important. And I think that's the deal is, number one, we as coaches need to evaluate our athletes' movements, because I've had it before where it's overhead squat day and somebody's like, yeah, I can't overhead squat. And I'm like, are you hurt? And they're like, nah, I just can't do it. And I'm like, all right, well, let me be the judge of that.
Yeah, can't
Right?
or don't want to. Don't
Yes,
like it.
exactly. So let me be the judge of that. Let me evaluate and watch you move here and see if we can clean some things up and make you move better with it. And then there's a give and a take. There is a time and a place, I think, where it's perfectly appropriate. Maybe it's somebody that's brand new and all they're going to do is that training bar, and 5 sets of 3 reps with the training bar is plenty challenging enough, and they're new enough to where it's like, hey, that's not going to overdo it. I think it's perfectly fine just doing overhead squats with a training bar, and they can get plenty of a stimulus from that. And there's another time and place, like we described, where we move it to a different movement and let them load up as we go. So
I love the overhead lunge as an option, like Yen said, because many people that struggle with the squat with an overhead position, if you simply do the one leg, the lunge, that is a game changer to be able to still hold that overhead position. You're still doing, getting yourself below parallel. I like that option as well.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
great. And even like Angelo talking about a band. So you get a band, I'm assuming you're standing on it, and then it's out and around to the side of you, and now you're holding it over your head. And so as you squat
I
down,
like
it
that.
actually feels lighter and gets easier. And then
And
you
then you
stand
could
back up, it
press
gets
up.
harder.
I've not done that, Angelo. I like that a lot. I'm going to play around with that. That's great. I like that.
And that's a cool way because there's way more play, right? Somebody
Uh-huh.
whose arms come forward, you're not going to dump the weight or put yourself in a weird position. So I think there's some cool creative ways to continue to overhead squat. I mean, we watched the video on here with Eric O'Connor providing some of that stuff, like the landmine version of the overhead squat. Yeah, there's a lot of great options there. So threshold training doesn't only apply to like 1 rep max lifts. It doesn't only apply to like making sure that we get the movements or the loading right for the Metcon, but it's also pushing people to move better, evaluating us being the one to dictate that, and changing on a day-to-day basis, situation to situation basis, based on the needs of the athlete, and continuing to do what's going to be best for them long term, I think is the big deal there.
Love it.
What else we got? Anything? It's great. Oh yeah, I love this right here. Yeah, you can feel everything. It's one of those accommodating resistance. Those bands are amazing. Way better, way more uses than just to put your foot into to get your chin over the bar with a pull up. Oh yeah, I was curious how you were going to overhead squat with that. You know what's funny, Grant, is you mentioned this, is I think you could potentially, it might be tough, but you could potentially, I think what you're saying is you put the J hooks down low, you put the band across, and then you stand in it to do banded pull-ups. You could probably, to some degree, bring it up and play with that. I don't know. There might be a way you could do it in the rig and do that, but I think
once you film that and put it on Instagram.
yeah, tag us. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think standing on it the way Angelo was talking about is a good way to go.
Yeah,
but
no, I think that's great.
Always
Yeah,
good
this is
stuff.
a great discussion. I mean, it's one of those things. It just we can set ourselves up for success as best as we can, but you've got to see what's in front of you and just like go with your gut, make the right call. It's going to change like every day, and just keep doing it, keep practicing, and you'll develop your muscle for it for sure. Get a little bit better at it as you go.
And as always, if you guys like this stuff and you want more of it, become a part of the Knowledge. We got the Knowledge Pro. We've got a ton of videos, ton of content, more cool stuff coming on the way. If you're an affiliate owner, take advantage of the 2 weeks free of Affiliate University. Also know that if you sign up between now and the end of August, you get thrown into a raffle to get your affiliate dues paid for a year. That's insane. And you also get a credential. So you yourself or one of your coaches can level up, and we at Best Hour will pay for it. And then we are inching closer and closer to October, where we're going to have Affiliate Con. If you're part of a affiliate university already, we're going to have a mastermind beforehand. Word on the street is there's going to be a special knowledge specific thing going on. So you guys want to make sure you're a part of that. So as always, Kristin, enjoyed it. Look forward to chatting with you again next week. And
all right,
we'll talk to you guys later.
See everybody next week.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. Now, if you're a coach who wants to coach more effectively, impact your members, and advance your career, then the Knowledge Pro is the next step. Inside, you'll get hundreds of coaching videos, weekly calls with level 4 coaches, and direct feedback on your coaching. From homework reviews to full class breakdowns, we do it all. This is the best way to grow as a coach and take your skills to the next level. Now, you can join the Knowledge Pro at besthouroftheirday.com/the-knowledge. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Now keep coaching, keep improving, and we'll see you next time.